The cookbook that everyone is talking about right now is the Essential New York Times Cookbook by Amanda Hesser. It is a massive book of the last 150 years of New York Times best recipes. There are so many great stories. There are recipes here from the late 1800s, the early 1900s, and just a few years ago. Full disclosure, I did work with Amanda Hesser at the New York Times Magazine for 5 years. I did test a couple of the recipes that ended up in this book. The recipe I've chosen to make is a meat and spinach loaf, and that's just like a weird name. I don't think Amanda changed many of the titles of these recipes. They probably should have just called it like a spinach meatloaf. Apparently it's supposed to be very good. I have not tested that recipe, and I'm gonna test it today for the first time in my home kitchen. And the first thing I should do is heat the oven to 350 degrees. Gotta get that going right away. So it calls for some spinach, bacon, then we have some milk, eggs, ground pork, ground beef, an onion, garlic, and butter, celery, parsley over here, bread, good old organic tomato sauce, and some nutmeg. That's everything. This is pretty basic for a meatloaf. The amount of spinach that there is in here, that's the most surprising part about this recipe, because usually I don't put much or any spinach in a meatloaf. She doesn't say to like spin it in a salad spinner, just to drain it in a colander. It says a half a cup of fresh breadcrumbs. I'm gonna just cut the bread into little pieces so I can put them in the food processor. All right, good to go. Okay, that's what I need for this recipe. Salt, pepper, and nutmeg. I love nutmeg. It's like a work of art. Could be in the MoMA. Take my breadcrumbs, throw my pepper in there, throw my nutmeg and salt to taste. 1 1/4 pounds of ground veal, pork, or beef, or a combination of all three. It's frustrating to me that they don't say what the best combo is, but they probably don't know. So I went with 1/2 pound of pork, 3/4 of a pound of beef, and no veal because the shop didn't have any veal. Get a 1/2 cup of coarsely chopped celery and 1/2 cup of loosely packed parsley leaves. This is when you need music. Where's the music? I like to cut my garlic like I cut an onion. Okay. And now I'm gonna do the onion. We now need 1/4 of a cup of whole milk, 1 tablespoon of butter, 2 large eggs lightly beaten. So now that we have all of our ingredients ready to go here, we're ready to start cooking. Yay, we get to cook. So we're gonna start with the spinach. Place in a saucepan and cover. Over what heat? It doesn't say. I'm gonna go with medium. We're gonna cook it for about 2 minutes here. So I probably should set my timer just so I don't forget about it. So here's our meat. I can add the breadcrumbs now. I would take a little patty, sear it on both sides, and then taste it. And if I need more salt, then I add more. This recipe doesn't call for that, so I'm not letting myself do that. It's not even near there because it hasn't wilted enough. I think what I should have done is put it over higher heat. So I'm gonna raise the heat a little. It would be great if it had said, you know, to put it over high heat. Okay, so spinach is steaming away. It's nice and wilted. Now we're rinsing it under cold water. Just push on it to try to get as much of the water. And then you're gonna chop it. I'm gonna do it pretty finely. Or roughly is more like it. This is when you put the celery, parsley, and milk in the blender. This is the strangest of the instructions, I think. But I guess it's just flavoring the milk. That's all I can figure. I haven't messed up yet. I'm kind of surprised. I usually mess up somewhere when I'm following a recipe just exactly. And that's why sometimes it's fun to read a recipe and then just sort of follow it. But then you can't complain that the recipe didn't work when you mess it up. Heat the butter in a small skillet, add the onion, and cook until wilted. Until wilted? It's a weird thing to say, like wilted onions. I mean, I guess she means translucent or cooked, but it's kind of unclear. Okay, I think we're about there. Add to the meat mixture, add the eggs, and blend well with your hands. You don't want to use a spoon. You need to get like right in there with your hands. I want everything to look really even. I don't want to see big clumps of beef and pork. I want it to look the same. So at this point, we're ready to bake. We just dump it in the loaf pan. Voila. All right, pat it down. And then it says to lay the bacon over it. Put it in the oven for 1 hour to 1 1/4. I'm gonna set the timer. I typically haven't had too many meatloafs that I loved, and I kind of avoid them. I'd rather make like a meatball. So I'm hoping that I really like this one. Hoping that bacon fat will do some wonders for the meat. Okay, so it's been in here for 1 hour and 15 minutes. I rotated it halfway through, and there's a lot of fat in there. So I'm gonna pour that into a bowl. Let's see how this goes. It's tricky. Okay, so here we go. Bacon there. Time for a verdict here. It's good. This is possibly the best meatloaf I've ever had. It's delicious. There are a few things I would change, but this recipe worked really well, and there's something so homey about this, something so 70s-ish, yet it works today too. And I would completely, totally serve it for a dinner party.